All right, so now in any performance appraisal or performance management system, you're going to eventually need to rate. That is, the managers at whether the frequency of review is once a month, once a week, once a year. Inevitably, what's going to happen is a manager is going to have to rate employees in some way or another, quantify the performance of an employee. Okay, and there's a variety of different formats that you can use to do so. So we've already seen what performance appraisals is, right? So it's promoting and firing and developmental purposes and documentation. And so the rating format used can have huge implications. So one of the easiest ways that you can rate an employee, and again, I say rate an employee, and that is to say quantify their behavior. In particular, quantify job performance. I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, but realistically, that is all we're doing here in performance management is quantifying job performance. When we talked about what job performance means and how broad it is. Okay, so a graphic rating scale is just a version of a Likert scale. And so what you're going to do is simply, on a scale of 1 to 7, does this employee, here, for the hypothetical construct of dependability, remember dependability could be part of the larger job performance construct, right? So dependability, are they below expectations, meet, exceeds, etc. Okay, pretty simple to use, straightforward. It's the first ones that were created. And the idea of Likert scales go way, way back to Gustav Fechner in the 1850s, who essentially said anything that exists in some quantity. All right, whether we're talking about beauty or justice or truth, right? They exist in different degrees, and you can quantify it. Okay, so clearly the earliest things that were done. But if you don't have good anchor points, like here, below expectations, well, what is the expectation? And if the manager doesn't really have a clear grasp of what the expectation is, what is below meets and exceeds, okay? They're often associated with trait ratings. That is to say, is this person dependable? Is often tied in with, do I like this guy, okay? And so clearly there's other things that are going to be mixed into the rating system, okay? Raters don't seem to mind how many points are on the scale, but ratees, the people that are being rated, the employees, like to have more numbers on the scale. More numbers, because if there's, on a scale of 1 to 3 and you get a 1, you got to do a hell of a lot to go from 1 to 2. But if you have a scale of 1 to 7 and you're a 3, moving from 3 to 4 seems manageable. So the ratees have a different opinion than the raters. And there are some definite implications for, say, for example, should you have an even number of points or an odd number of points? Because if you have some kind of, in this case, an odd number of points, you're always going to have some middle point which is average or neutral or something of this nature. And it sometimes, as we'll discuss in the next video, sometimes raters will sort of gravitate towards this middle one. If you have an even number of points on this scale, then it forces, there is no middle point. There is no even middle split. There isn't one. Okay? You have to have an opinion. Okay? So there's a variety of different things that can be done, like a checklist. All right, you could simply, dependability, yes or no, reliability, yes or no, and you could just go down, tick, 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 tick. Or here you could have a checklist and weight it, because of course different items on here have different value. All right, so here's a weighted checklist for blah blah blah. Must be like an IT help desk or something like that. Okay, and so you simply yes or no on an employee, and then they get this many points. If it's a yes, you get this many points. If it's a no, you get nothing. So it's an interesting idea. And look at this: we can put positive things and negative things. And so it turns out that being in the office 40 hours a week is a valuable thing, but it's not that important relative to backs up the computer systems. Here is another Likert scale kind of thing, and here, as you can see as an example, there is 10 points, and so there is no no center. There is no, I mean, what is the middle? There is none. It's a 5 is on one side, a 6 is on the other. There is nothing. And so not only are we going to put on the two different ends, exceeds expectations, etc., but you can see what we're going to do is we're going to put some examples, behavioral examples at certain points in the scale to give the rater some idea of what behaviors they ought to be considering when rating. Here's a behavioral observation scale. It's similar, but what you're going to do here is kind of you're going to ask the rater to rate on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different questions that are all related to the exact same question, right? They're all related to overcoming resistance to change, okay? And so what happens here is you would take the average of these, and I mean this goes back to Aristotle. If you want to know the truth of the world, don't look at one dog, look at 50 dogs and take the average. And it's the same thing. If you want to know the truth of what is somebody's score on overcoming resistance to change, make 6 measures, average them, and you're much more likely to get at the truth. Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting idea of rank ordering. So employees can be ranked from best to worst, and so you could break it apart based on knowledge, dependability, and quality. And you could take your different employees and you could rate them on these things, right? Oh, Barino is number 1 in knowledge, Fields is number 2, etc. On dependability, Barino is number 1, Fields is number 3, Hicks is the second. And so you could use this to then create some kind of a total score, but then the question is, what do you do with them? I mean, in some kind of an obvious way, maybe Cook ought to be looking for a new job, but the score is just the number that gets presented. And as we're going to talk about in some other places, I mean, maybe Cook isn't that bad. Maybe Barino, Fields, Hicks, and Sparks are just awesome. And so Cook is just kind of getting the short end of the stick if he had been compared, he or she, right? Well, I don't know who Cook is. If Cook had been compared to a different set of employees, maybe Cook would have came out number 1, all right? I don't know. Huh? Here's an interesting idea with paired comparisons. And so what you're going to do with this one is you're going to compare. Let's say, for example, that you're going to pair people on multiple dimensions. So let's start with dependability, okay? And so you can compare employee A with employee B. Which one is more dependable, okay? And whichever one is more dependable gets 1 point. And then compare employee A to employee C. Which one is more dependable? Whoever is gets 1 point. Then compare employee A to employee D, all right? And so you can see in this simple example, on any score like dependability, or any measure such as dependability, the highest score you could get is a 3, right? And so you could, again, it come up with, but as you have a lot of different people in the organization, the number of comparisons required, it becomes quite large. And again, it's also the same problem that we have here. It depends on the field that you're being compared to. So employee A might look awesome, but maybe B, C, and D are just crap employees. So, what are you going to do with it? Okay. In a forced distribution, and we're going to come across this when we talk some legal implications, but in a forced distribution, you're going to, put people into categories. It's going to try to take advantage of the normal distribution. You're going to find that again, it's the same problem. You create a normal distribution, but every normal distribution has to have an average. And if the group of employees that you are rating at this moment are particularly high, then the average of the center of the normal distribution will be high, and therefore even very good employees can be considered very low. All right. You can have a Z-score of -5 even if you're a great employee, if you're being compared to, rock stars or something. So it's really got some issues. So here we go. You got your rating scales are easy, easy, easy. But what do they mean? Behaviorally anchored has an advantage over the graphic rating scales. Obviously, they take more time to create them, but they're better because now the rater, instead of, as we said at the beginning, graphic rating scales, it's just it exceeds expectations. No, no, no. Give me a behavior, okay? Checklists are really easy to use, but as we're going to talk about in the next video, lots of errors can happen, okay? And then in the employee comparison methods, as we said, the biggest disadvantage is clearly it just depends on the overall quality of the group you're working with, okay? So we'll talk more about rating errors in the next video.